When my daughter-in-law sneered, "Don't think you're getting a cent from my husband's 30 million. I thought she was just being her usual sharp-tongued self. I'd heard plenty from Joyce over the years, enough icy remarks to fill a freezer. But at that moment, all those petty jabs felt like harmless pebbles compared to the boulder about to crush me. I was under the hood of a '92 Chevy in my garage, my sanctuary, my whole world, when the phone buzzed in my pocket. I expected it to be a customer complaining about a bill or needing a jumpstart. Instead, a doctor's voice shook my bones. "Mr. Morgan, I'm sorry to tell you this. Your son, Daniel, suffered a cardiac arrest at his office. The paramedics did everything they could, but he passed this morning." The wrench slipped from my hand and hit the concrete with a crack that sounded like the world splitting open. I leaned against the truck as the walls spun. My voice came from somewhere miles away. "My boy! What? He's only 42. The doctor repeated himself, each word landing like a hammer. Only when he asked if there was family to notify did his voice fade. Family, meaning Joyce. I ended the call and just sat there. The summer heat drifted through the garage door, hazy and slow, as if time itself felt guilty for moving. I stared at the old photo pinned above my workbench. Little 8-year-old Danny holding up a small catfish from our fishing trip, grinning like he'd conquered the world. Back then, nothing mattered except sunshine, muddy shoes, and a father-son Saturday. Before business school, before big houses and bigger egos, before Joyce. I dialed her number, straight to voicemail. "Joyce, it's Tom. Call me. We need to talk about arrangements." I tried again 20 minutes later, then again, and again. Same result. Her voice chirping from her polished recording, sounding like she was auditioning to be CEO of Coldness. On the 6th call, I snapped, "Joyce, I know you hear me. This isn't a business negotiation. Our son is gone. Stop ignoring me." I tossed the phone across the garage. Clattered, battery popping out and skidding under a shelf. I stood there breathing hard, hands shaking, the garage suddenly feeling too small for grief. We tend to think a lifetime in one moment. I saw Danny learning to ride his bike, skinning his knee, laughing, finding his confidence. I saw him graduate, move to California, step into a life so different from mine. Somehow the miles between us turned into walls. Maybe I built some of them. Maybe Joyce built more. But he was still my boy. I picked up the cracked phone, shoved the battery in, and knew waiting wasn't an option. So I packed 3 shirts, shaving kit, wallet photo, and a heart shaped like a piece of broken machinery, jagged and useless. I'd buried my wife years ago. Now I'd bury my son. My truck rumbled to life before dawn, headlights cutting through Texas dust. Mrs. Henderson peered out her kitchen window as I backed out. Her hand hovered like she wanted to wave but didn't know how to approach tragedy. I waved anyway. I needed the human contact, even if she didn't understand. The highway stretched like a challenge I didn't want to face. 12 long hours through New Mexico, Arizona, all the way to California. I didn't bother with the radio. Silence felt honest. Noise would have been an insult. Outside Albuquerque, grief ambushed me. I remembered tossing a baseball with Danny in our backyard, his tiny glove swallowing his hand, his voice full of hope. "Dad, when will I be as strong as you?" I told him, "Soon. Just keep your eye on the ball." But I didn't keep my eye on time. Somewhere between engines, bills, and staying in my comfort zone, he drifted into Joyce's world. Polished dinner parties, shiny motors, and people who'd never have grease under their nails. I stopped at a rest area and cried harder than I ever did in my life. For the kid he was. For the father I sometimes failed to be. For the life he built without me. Hours later, Los Angeles greeted me with glittering lights and silence just as sharp. Beverly Hills gates loomed in front of me, mocking me with iron bars and manicured hedges. My denim shirt felt like a costume in this world of marble and gold. I pressed the intercom button, heart pounding. "Joyce, it's Tom. I came to pay respects to my son." Silence. Then, "Fine. Wipe your boots before coming in." Grief burns, but disrespect? That stings deeper. When I walked through that mansion door, I had no idea I'd soon hear Danny's will, and watch Joyce's face drain of color as her world went crashing down. Joyce opened the door like she was answering for the queen, not her late husband's grieving father. The woman was a statue in black silk, flawless makeup, diamonds glinting like ice crystals. Even her grief looked rehearsed. "You look rough," she said flatly. I swallowed the hurt. I'd driven 12 hours with 1 hour of sleep and a heart held together by nothing but stubbornness. Of course I looked rough. "It's been a long day," I murmured. She turned, already walking away, heels clicking sharp as judgment on marble floors. "Remove your hat. And don't touch anything." Her home, my son's home, hit me like a punch to the ribs. Chandeliers the size of pickup engines. Windows tall enough to see the whole city glittering beneath like a field of artificial stars. The place smelled like expensive flowers and colder priorities. "Sit there," she said, gesturing to a couch that probably cost more than my garage. I perched on the edge, boots planted on a Persian rug I was terrified to scuff. Joyce stayed standing, like sitting near me might wrinkle her soul. She lifted her chin. "I've already arranged everything. The service, the cremation. It's all under control." "Cremation?" I blinked. "Danny told me he wanted to be buried back home, next to his mother." She gave a small, icy laugh. "Tom, you don't know what Daniel wanted these last few years. He changed. He evolved." My jaw clenched. "No one evolves away from their mother. Grief clouds memory," she sang, tilting her head like a schoolteacher scolding a child. "Daniel wanted simplicity." "No," the word cracked out of me like thunder across a dry field. "He talked about resting beside his mom. He was 7 when she passed. He visited her grave every weekend until college." Her expression didn't soften. It didn't move at all. Times change. People change. And frankly, the cemetery in your little town isn't fitting for a man of Daniel's stature. There it was, that smirk of superiority, like she thought I'd shown up dragging dust and poverty behind me. I stood slowly, not threatening, just tired and determined. "He was my son before he was your trophy." A flicker, tiny but there, passed through her eyes. Annoyance? Fear? Hard to tell through all the makeup and marble. "The service is Friday," she said, dismissing me with a wave. "Private. Close friends only." "You mean wealthy ones?" I muttered. Her gaze narrowed. "You may attend, but don't cause a scene. Daniel wouldn't want that." Daniel. Funny how she always said his full name like she owned it. To me he'd always be Danny. The boy with scraped knees and muddy sneakers, giggling as worms wriggled on fishing hooks. "I'll come by tomorrow morning," I said. "We need to make decisions together." "No," she shot back. "There's nothing for you to do here. I am handling his affairs, his business, his legacy. You should focus on whatever it is you do in Texas. Fix engines, pay bills, miss my wife, miss my son. Pretend grief isn't a weight strapped to my chest." She walked me to the door with perfect posture, a general escorting a defeated soldier. At the threshold she paused, voice dropping low. "Daniel left a considerable estate. Don't embarrass yourself by thinking you're entitled to it." I stared at her, this woman who shared a last name with my boy but no soul of his. And I realized something chilling. She wasn't grieving him. She was grieving control. Back at my old pickup, I craned my neck and looked at that mansion glittering like a crown. A palace Danny built brick by brick. One I never understood. But behind all that marble and money, it suddenly felt hollow, like a museum for a life that never had room for me. I turned the key. The engine growled. Heavy, sad, determined. As I drove to the motel, the city lights blurred, and I whispered to the dark freeway, "I hope you knew I loved you, boy, even from far away." Tomorrow, I'd sit among strangers pretending to mourn my son, and watch Joyce turn grief into a performance. But nothing prepared me for what she whispered about me in that funeral hall, loud enough for everyone to hear. The funeral home looked more like a luxury hotel lobby than a place for goodbyes. Polished floors, gold accents, flowers piled so high they could have decorated a royal wedding. It was beautiful and it felt wrong. Danny never cared for show. He cared for people, for loyalty, for things that don't shine but last. But this was Joyce's arena. She stood by the entrance like she owned grief, greeting guests with the grace of a politician and the sincerity of a billboard. Every kiss on the cheek was measured. Every hand she gripped was a calculated performance. Her tears looked so practiced they might as well have been imported like her jewelry. I signed the guest book, handshaking, and took a seat in the very back. I didn't belong with the polished, whispering crowd in tailored suits. They weren't here for Danny. They were here for reputation, for social currency, for the bragging rights of attending a wealthy man's goodbye. I listened while people fabricated memories they never had. He was so driven. He inspired everyone. He was always smiling. They didn't know the kid who stayed up late building model airplanes with glue all over his fingers. They didn't know the young man calling me scared before his first business pitch. They didn't know him. They knew the glossy brochure version. But I sat, because that's what fathers do when love aches. We stay. Joyce floated from group to group like a raven in silk. Her voice low, soft, dramatic. I heard one woman murmur, "You're handling this with such poise, dear." And Joyce dabbed her eyes delicately, just enough to seem tragic, not enough to ruin her makeup. I stared at the polished floor. My boots felt like they didn't deserve to touch it. Then I heard my name. Joyce's voice drifted across the room. Sharp, cold, and meant to wound. "That old man thinks he's part of this. Daniel was ashamed of him, you know? A knife straight to the ribs." A blonde woman gasped softly. "Joyce, he's grieving too." Joyce laughed, a sound like glass cracking. "He barely visited. He just wants to feel important now. Some people wait until death to pretend they cared." Silence hit me harder than the words. Mourning is torture, but humiliation in mourning? That's cruelty you have to train for. I stood quietly and walked toward her circle. The ambient whispers died like candles snuffed in a church. "Joyce," I said softly, "this day is about my son, not your ego." Gasped, eyes turning. The air froze. Joyce's expression sharpened into brittle politeness, the mask sliding back on. "Tom, we all grieve differently," she said sweetly. "Some of us privately, some with theatrics." I studied her for a long second, then nodded. "Yes, some perform, some feel." The minister motioned for everyone to sit. I returned to my spot in the back, chest tight, vision blurry. I didn't blow up. I didn't shout. Danny deserved better than a scene. The service started. Hymns Danny never once listened to. Readings from books he never owned. Words crafted to please image, not honor truth. People cried on schedule. But when they wheeled out his closed casket, the room turned ghostly quiet. Real grief doesn't need applause. When my turn came, I approached the box of wood and metal that held what used to be my reason for waking up proud. I placed my hand on it like fathers do when they bless their sons. "I hope you knew I never stopped loving you," I whispered. My voice cracked. I hope you knew I was proud." I pressed my forehead to the smooth surface, not caring who watched anymore, and breathed in memories. Oil-stained baseball caps, fishing lines, late-night burgers, birthday candles, awkward hugs, phone calls too short and years too long. Then I walked away before my legs gave out. Outside, the limousines and sports cars lined up like a parade of privilege. Joyce climbed into hers and touched up her lipstick. Grief maintenance, I suppose. Meanwhile, I sat in my truck, trying to breathe. As the procession moved, a strange feeling clawed at me. Not sadness, suspicion. She was too controlled, too confident, too ready to talk business at a funeral. And that's when the unease became certainty. Whatever Danny left behind, she wasn't mourning it. She was guarding it. And later that day, when the lawyer opened the will, I would learn exactly what she'd been clawing to protect. And the look on her face when she realized the truth, it would change everything. If funerals are for grief, will readings are for truth. After the service and the cemetery and the forced condolences from people who didn't know Danny beyond a business handshake, I drove behind Joyce's limousine to a downtown high-rise. A skyscraper polished so bright it reflected the clouds like it thought it owned the sky. Inside, her heels clicked marble like they were issuing orders. My boots thudded, reminders of dirt roads and honest work. She barely looked back, just enough to say, "Try not to embarrass yourself." Daniel trusted me with his life and his legacy. I didn't answer. I was too tired for war, even if she couldn't tell the difference between dignity and defeat. We entered a corner office with glass walls and a view of Los Angeles sprawled like a kingdom beneath us. The lawyer, Mr. Hemsley, stood when we walked in. Silver hair, calm eyes, the posture of a man who'd seen families come apart the way engines seize when the wrong hands touch them. There were a few others present, distant relatives, business partners, people who looked like they managed trust funds for breakfast. Joyce didn't sit next to me. She sat at the head of the conference table, spine straight, chin high, black dress immaculate. She didn't need a crown. Her posture wore one. "Let's skip to the estate division," she said, adjusting a diamond bracelet to catch the light. "We all know Daniel provided for me." The lawyer nodded cautiously. "We will read it in order, Mrs. Morgan." She waved a manicured hand. "Fine, just get to the point." I sat there fighting the urge to defend Danny, because whatever mistakes I made as a father, I knew one truth: he didn't love arrogance. Mr. Hemsley began reading. "To my cousin Michael, to my business partners, to longtime colleagues, smaller gifts, meaningful tokens, a watch here, a stock portion there, a wine collection gifted." Joyce nodded as if approving a menu she'd already chosen. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. The room shifted. Even the city outside seemed to wait. "And to my wife, Joyce Morgan, I leave our condo in Santa Monica, and all furnishings within." A beat of silence. Then just the faintest crack in her smile. "That's only the condo?" she asked, voice tight. The lawyer did not flinch. "That is correct." "And the remainder?" she pushed, still confident, though her knuckles whitened on the table's edge. He turned another page. Slow, deliberate. "To my father, Thomas Morgan, I leave the majority of my financial estate, including business holdings, investment portfolios, and liquid accounts, totaling approximately $29 million. The room dissolved, not in volume, but in silence so thick you could drown in it. Joyce's face drained of color like someone had pulled the plug on her blood flow. Her jaw twitched. A pulse hammered at her temple. That has to be wrong." Her voice squeaked like glass under strain. "Read it again." "I assure you, Mrs. Morgan, the document is clear." She turned to me. Fury, disbelief, and something else pooling in her eyes. "You manipulated him," she hissed. "He felt guilty. He was vulnerable. You preyed on him." I blinked. "Joyce, I didn't even know he had that kind of money." The lawyer lifted a hand. "Mrs. Morgan, your husband executed this will 3 months ago. There was no evidence of impaired judgment. It was notarized, witnessed, and confirmed." Her voice rose, cracking like a whip. "He wouldn't do this to me. He loved me." I didn't speak, didn't move. I just felt like a man watching a storm tear apart a tree that had always pretended it was steel. She slammed her palm on the table. "This is theft. He owed me everything. I built him. I supported him. I elevated him." A bitter truth rose in my chest. I didn't say it aloud, but I felt it. "You didn't love him. You loved the pedestal." Her breathing turned ragged, makeup trembling, the mask breaking. "I will fight this," she spat. "I will bury you with lawyers." Mr. Hemsley remained perfectly calm. "You have the right to challenge it. But the will stands unless overturned." She stood so fast her chair scraped marble. She grabbed her purse like a weapon. "This is not over," she snarled at me. "You don't deserve a dime. You didn't raise him for the man he became. I did." She stormed out, heels stabbing the floor, rage trailing like smoke. The room stayed frozen. Someone muttered, "Well, damn." Someone else whispered, "He must have trusted his father deeply." But all I heard was the last echo of Joyce's heels, and my son's voice inside me, small and 8 years old. Dad, am I doing it right? I closed my eyes, and I finally let myself cry. I thought the battle was over when she stormed out of that office. I was wrong. Joyce didn't lose. She simply went hunting for a more savage weapon, and the war she started would drag me into court, and into the darkest truth about my son's final months. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my motel bed staring at a popcorn ceiling lit by the flickering neon sign outside. $29 million didn't feel like wealth. Felt like a weight, a responsibility, a goodbye gift from a son I never expected to lose or hear from again in such a way. Joyce didn't cry for love. She cried for power lost. And people like her don't surrender, they reload. The phone rang at 6 a.m. Unknown number. I already knew who it was. I answered. Yeah. Her voice came sharp as a blade. I hope you enjoyed yesterday. Because it's temporary. Morning to you too. You think you can steal my husband's legacy? You think some rural mechanic is going to walk away with millions? Joyce, I didn't take anything. I didn't even know. Save your innocent act, she hissed. I hired attorney Richard Stone, the best in the city. He destroys men like you. I sat up. My ribcage felt too tight. You destroy yourselves, I said quietly. I just showed up. She scoffed. Tomorrow we start. I expect to see you in court. The line went dead. I sat there staring at my reflection in the motel TV screen. Bagged eyes, stubble, a man who looked more tired than rich. I didn't feel like someone who inherited a fortune. I felt like someone walking into a storm barefoot. Harlan arrives. My oldest friend showed up later that afternoon, suitcase in hand, wrinkles deeper than I remembered. Boy, he grunted, hugging me like he was holding up a collapsing beam. You look like hell. I laughed despite the pressure in my chest. You flew all the way here? A man shouldn't fight alone when the devil's working overtime. I swallowed hard. Harlan always had a way of putting truth in a single sentence. We talked for hours. About the hearing. About Danny. About how a simple life suddenly felt like it was being judged in a courtroom where boots and blue-collar truth weren't welcome. You think she'll win? I finally asked. Harlan sat forward, elbows on knees, voice low. Joyce hired a predator. But facts beat theatrics if you don't flinch. I'm not scared of losing money, I whispered. I'm scared of losing my son's last decision. Harlan put a hand on my shoulder. Then fight like hell. For him, the attacks begin. Joyce's lawyer, Stone, wasted no time. The first court filing painted me like some manipulative con artist. A grieving father turned swindler. He claimed I preyed on Danny's guilt, that I wormed back into his life to grab fortune, that I used illness and distance to twist my son's emotions. I stared at the words and felt my soul bruise. I barely visited, I murmured. That's the truth. I wasn't some puppeteer. I was a dad trying not to feel small in a world my son built without me. That's exactly why it'll get nasty, Harlan said. Guilt is easier to weaponize than facts. And weaponize it they did. Whispers started. Some business contact of Danny's muttered at a cafe. He's the father? Heard he guilt-tripped Danny before he died. A neighbor near Joyce's place murmured to another. From nothing to millions? Sounds suspicious. Judgment comes fast when money's involved. Faster when pride is wounded. I stayed in my motel. Ate diner food that tasted like cardboard and memory. Walked parking lots because my lungs needed air more than my dignity needed quiet. And each night, I looked at Danny's childhood photo and wondered if I deserved any of this. If sometimes love isn't enough to earn closeness. If a son outgrows a father, does it mean the father failed? Or did he just stand still too long? The night before court, the evening before the first hearing, I sat on the edge of my bed, elbows on my knees. Harlan cleaned his glasses in the corner, staring at me like a general watching a soldier tie his boots before a battle. You know, I said softly, Danny once asked me if being a man meant leaving where you came from. I told him no. It meant remembering who helped you stand. Harlan nodded. He remembered. Maybe not loudly. Maybe not perfectly. But this inheritance? It's his voice saying you mattered. I wiped my eyes. Then I'll defend his voice. We stood at the motel window, watching headlights smear across the asphalt. You ready? Harlan asked. No, I answered honestly. But I'll go anyway. Courage isn't walking into court smiling. It's walking in shaking and still moving forward. Tomorrow Joyce would attack. Her lawyer would tear my history apart. My fatherhood dissected by strangers. But I knew one truth deeper than my doubt. My son made his decision with clarity and love. I couldn't fail him now. The next day, I walked into that courtroom expecting a legal fight. What I got instead was a psychological ambush, and a truth about Danny I never wanted to face. Courtrooms are strange places. Quiet, polished, orderly. But underneath, they're battlegrounds where truth and lies wrestle while everyone pretends it's civilized. Harlan and I walked into the courthouse like two men heading into a storm with only one raincoat between us. Joyce was already there, wrapped in black like grief was a fashion statement. Beside her sat Richard Stone, the shark in an immaculate suit, eyes sharp enough to carve innocence into guilt. I could almost smell the confidence on them, expensive, perfumed, curated. Ceiling fans hummed, shoes shuffled, papers rustled. Every sound felt louder than it should have. The judge entered, stern eyes, silver hair pinned tight, a face carved from fairness and fatigue. She didn't look the type to be impressed by theatrics. Good. I needed truth to matter here. Stone began like a man auditioning for a movie judge instead of addressing a real one. Your Honor, this case represents manipulation at its most calculated. An estranged father swoops in, exploiting emotional vulnerability to seize the fortune of a successful young man. I felt my blood boil. Estranged. That word tasted like acid. Estranged means you stopped loving someone. I never stopped. Cease, the lawyer, calm, patient, a quiet strength, waited for his turn. Joyce dabbed her eyes, making sure every move was visible. She looked less like a widow and more like someone practicing grief in a mirror until the angle felt perfect. Stone called her to the stand first. She walked with a slight tremble, the kind meant to evoke sympathy, not actually born from pain. Mrs. Morgan, Stone purred. Tell the court what Daniel experienced before his passing. Her voice quivered professionally. He was troubled, depressed, overworked. He felt pressured by expectations. He told me his father always made him feel inadequate. My throat tightened. Inadequate? I never once asked Danny to be anything but happy. And when Mr. Morgan came around toward the end, she continued, Daniel was distraught for days. His father would remind him of childhood promises. Guilt trip him about visits home, question our marriage. That's not true, I blurted without thinking. Sir, the judge warned gently, you'll have your turn. Joyce looked at me then, not sorrowful, triumphant. She thought she was winning, thought her story was finally painting me as the villain she needed me to be. Stone leaned in. Mrs. Morgan, did your husband seem confused? Vulnerable? Yes, she whispered. He was fragile, and a fragile man can be influenced, manipulated, coerced. They were building a prison around my character brick by brick. Stone sat. Cease stood. Mrs. Morgan? Cease asked calmly. How often did Mr. Morgan visit your husband in recent years? She blinked. Rarely. Almost never. And did he ever ask for money? No, she said reluctantly. Did your husband indicate any intention to change his will before those visits? No. Did your husband tell anyone, friends, advisors, his attorney, that he felt manipulated by his father? She hesitated. He didn't need to. I saw it. No facts. Only feeling. Only entitlement disguised as sorrow. Cease nodded slowly. No more questions. Then Stone came for me. He paced in front of me like a vulture blocking out the sun. Mr. Morgan, how often did you visit your son? 3 times in the last couple years, I admitted. Why so little contact? I swallowed hard. The truth was simple. It also hurt. Life got busy. Pride got in the way. And I didn't fit into his world. So you were absent? Absent. The word slashed at me. I loved him. I never walked away from him. But you avoided him. I didn't avoid him, I argued. I just didn't know how to join his life without feeling like I was intruding. Joyce smiled behind her hand. It wasn't grief. It was victory. Stone circled. So when you finally showed up again, conveniently near the time he changed his will, you never once discussed money? Never. Never hinted you were struggling? Needed help? Reminded him of old promises? No. Yet he suddenly left you nearly $30 million. Curious, isn't it? I stared at him. It wasn't sudden to him. It was something he decided. I didn't ask for it. I didn't expect it. I didn't even know it existed. Stone leaned closer, voice slick as oil. Tell me, Mr. Morgan, did you ever tell your son you were proud of him? Silence dropped like a hammer. Did I? Enough? Loud enough? Often enough? I closed my eyes. Not as often as I should have. A sound soft, like a knife sliding, came from Joyce. Satisfaction. Stone smiled like he'd cracked my chest open. No further questions. The judge paused. Studied me. Studied her. Studied the truth swimming in the room like a wounded thing. Court adjourned for the day. Outside the courtroom, Joyce approached me in the hallway, venom hidden behind a practiced pout. You won't win, she whispered. Danny was mine. I met her eyes, and for the first time I didn't see wealth or beauty or status. I saw fear. Fear that control had slipped. Fear that truth was louder than performance. I didn't lose him to death, I said quietly. You lost him while he was alive. Her face cracked. For 1 second, the mask slipped, and her rage was naked. She spun on her heel and walked away. Harlan placed a hand on my shoulder. You fought straight. Tomorrow the truth lands. I nodded, not proud, not confident, just determined. Danny didn't give me money. He gave me a voice I'd forgotten I had. And I would use it. The court wasn't done with us, and neither was fate. Because that night, I would discover something about Danny's last weeks that broke me all over again, and made Joyce's behavior make terrifying sense. After court, the city lights of Los Angeles blurred into streaks of gold and sorrow as Harlan and I drove back to the motel. I didn't turn on the radio. Some silences deserve respect. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. Cease. Tom, he said, voice measured. There's something you need to know before tomorrow. My chest tightened. What is it? There were medical records the opposition did not submit. I obtained them today. I braced. Are you telling me Danny was vulnerable? He paused. Heavy. Careful. Not in the way Joyce claims. How then? Another sigh. Come to my office first thing in the morning. No one should hear this over the phone. He hung up. My stomach sank like a stone in deep water. Was Danny sick? Depressed? Did he suffer quietly? Did he need me and I wasn't there? The motel room felt smaller than ever. The air stale. The bed too stiff like punishment. Harlan watched me pace. You're thinking the worst. I'm thinking maybe she's right, I whispered. Maybe I failed him so badly he reached out in desperation. Harlan stood, eyes steady. Listen to me. Grief plays tricks. Joyce doesn't get to define your fatherhood. But guilt is a stubborn beast. It gnawed at my ribs all night. At dawn, I stood outside Cease's office staring at the building's glass facade reflecting a sun that didn't feel earned. My heart beat like a hammer in my throat. Harlan squeezed my shoulder. No matter what it is, you'll face it. Inside, Cease closed the door gently, like we were about to break. His desk held a thin file. A single folder, yet it felt heavy enough to drop a man to his knees. He pushed it toward me. Daniel visited his doctor twice in the last 2 months, Cease said gently. Complaints of fatigue, insomnia, chest tightness. I swallowed hard. Stress. Yes, intense stress. He hesitated. But not from his business. I frowned. Then from what? He turned a page and tapped a notation. Patient reports marital strain. Feeling increasingly isolated at home. Expresses guilt about distancing from father. States desire to rebuild family connection. My vision blurred. Danny wanted to come back. He wanted me. He was trying. My throat burned. He was reaching out. Cease nodded. He told his doctor reconciling with you felt like the first right thing he'd done in a long time. I gripped the armchair until the leather creaked. And Joyce? I asked quietly, afraid of the answer. Cease flipped another page. Notes also mention emotional stress triggered by spouse. Possible verbal hostility. Patient advised to seek support and reduce marital conflict. I closed my eyes. Danny hadn't been drifting from me. He'd been escaping something. Trying to breathe again. Trying to come home not out of duty, but longing. Joyce's fury now made sense. She didn't lose money, she lost control. And she knew it before Danny passed. My hands shook. He didn't tell me. Cease softened his tone. Children don't always tell parents their burdens. Sometimes they just start walking back. Tears came, quiet, stubborn, real. I whispered, I wish I'd called him more. Harlan stepped forward. He knew you loved him. That's why he came back on his own terms. Cease nodded. And his will? It wasn't guilt. It was gratitude. He believed you were the one constant in his life. I wiped my face. Then why didn't he say something outright? Cease looked down. Because pride runs deep in men, even loving ones. I sat there, heart cracked open, grief mixing with relief, regret tangled with honor. Danny wasn't manipulated. He wasn't confused. He was coming home. And Joyce wasn't grieving a husband. She was grieving the walls he'd finally climbed over. When I stood to leave, I felt different. Steadier. A man walking not toward wealth, but toward truth. Outside, LA traffic roared, uncaring. But the sunrise felt like forgiveness warming my shoulders. I'll tell the court tomorrow, I said. Cease shook his head gently. No need. The judge already has this. But you can walk in there with peace instead of doubt. Peace. It didn't erase the ache, but it gave the ache dignity. Back at the motel, I placed Danny's childhood photo on the nightstand. His tooth-gap grin stared back at me. Proud, innocent, unaware of marble floors and trust funds and courtroom lies. You tried to find your way back, I murmured. I see that now. And as night fell over the city, for the first time since the phone call that broke my life, I slept. Not deeply, but without torment. Because tomorrow wasn't just a trial. Tomorrow was a homecoming. By morning, the courtroom doors opened again. And this time, Joyce wouldn't be the one with certainty in her eyes. Because the truth was about to land, and with it, judgment. The courthouse lobby felt different that morning. Not lighter, just clearer. Grief still sat in my chest like an old weight. But the self-doubt that clawed at me was gone. Danny hadn't left me money because I begged, or because guilt twisted him. He left it because love is stubborn, and it remembers who held you up before the world offered newer hands. And Joyce? She didn't fear losing wealth. She feared losing ownership of the life she thought she built. Harlan and I walked into the courtroom. He stayed just behind my shoulder, like a guardian spirit in worn boots and Texas grit. Joyce sat across from us. Today her makeup was heavier armor, not beauty. Stone whispered instructions in her ear, but she didn't nod. Her eyes kept flicking to me like she couldn't decide whether to hate me or fear me more. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Williams took her seat, hands folded, gaze steady. After review, she began, the court finds no evidence of coercion, undue influence, or mental incapacity in the execution of Mr. Morgan's will. Joyce stiffened like she'd been struck. The decedent's intentions were clear and deliberate. The will stands. Her voice dropped like a gavel of God. Final. Unshakable. Joyce shot to her feet. This court is wrong, she shouted. He would never choose him over me. The judge didn't flinch. Sit down, Mrs. Morgan. No. Joyce's voice cracked. I was his partner. I shaped his future. I made him who he was. That man. She jabbed a trembling finger toward me. Barely existed in his life. The courtroom whispered like dry leaves. I spoke softly, not to score a point, but because truth deserved voice. I wasn't always there enough, I admitted. But I never stopped loving him. I didn't teach him how to chase status. I taught him how to be good. Joyce laughed bitterly. And look how he repaid you. With pity. I shook my head. No, Joyce. With trust. She froze. A flicker of something raw crossing her face. Shock. Fear. Maybe somewhere buried deep, sorrow. Judge Williams called the bailiff again. Mrs. Morgan. Take your seat or be removed. Joyce sat, but her body looked like something collapsing inward. Like marble cracking from pressure it pretended not to feel. Then the judge looked at me. Mr. Morgan, do you have anything you wish to say before we close? I stood. Harlan's hand squeezed my arm once, steadying me. I lost my boy, I said. Money won't fix that. Nothing will. My voice wavered. I didn't hide it. I wish we had more years. I wish we talked more. I wish pride didn't make both of us wait for the other to call first. I glanced at Joyce. Not in anger, but truth. But love doesn't expire just because distance grew. He found his way back. And I'll carry that honor not as wealth, but as proof he remembered where he came from, and who held him before success ever did. Silence. A real silence. The kind that settles in the soul. Judge Williams nodded. Court is adjourned. Aftermath. We stepped outside into sunlight that felt too warm for a day like that. Joyce stormed past me without a word. Stone followed her, already calculating fees, not feelings. She stopped at the steps. For a heartbeat she just stood there, staring at the city like she desperately needed it to love her back. Then she turned, face tight, voice trembling with hatred and heartbreak tangled together. You don't deserve what he gave you. I met her eyes, and for once she looked small. Not because of wealth lost, but because she had nothing left to weaponize. I deserved being his father, I said quietly. And he chose to remember that. She blinked. Once sharply, like a woman slapped by a truth sharper than cruelty. Then she walked away fast, heels clicking like retreating gunshots. Harlan exhaled. Storm's over. No, I said softly. Just moved on. Home again. The drive back to Texas felt different. Not victorious, just real. The desert passed. The miles unwound. The weight became purpose. Days later, I stood in my garage again. Same oil stains. Same tools. Same life, but not the same man. I placed Danny's childhood photo on the workbench. The boy holding his fish, teeth too big for his smile, hope leaking from every pore. I whispered, You came back to me, and I'll spend the rest of my life being worthy of that. The garage was quiet, but the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Full of memory. Full of promise. Full of a son's final act of love and a father's renewed purpose. I picked up a wrench. My hands were still grease-stained, still calloused, still mine. But they were steadier. The world didn't change. I just understood my place in it again. A father. A man. And someone who finally believed he deserved his son's final gift. Not because of money, but because love, even when late, still counts. And sometimes it's enough to come home.